Yes, it's both. So we are watching the United States make a grand effort at starting a war with Venezuela to steal their resources. We know this. We're watching it. This is the facts. They are getting support, however, from a number of places, including Trinidad and Tobago. Trinidad and Tobago is an island that is the last island of the Caribbean. It is right down here. And it is very close to Venezuela. They share waters. There has been some accusations that Venezuela has tried to steal oil from Trinidad, and this has been used as legitimizing of why Trinidad would be in cahoots with the United States. However, I will state conclusively here and now that the truth of the matter is that the United States colonized the Caribbean. That is not some like weird assertion that I'm making. It is a basic bottom line fact. And unfortunately, in that colonizing, they will, of course, have folks who are going along with their ride. And I want to break down for you guys the myriad ways that has happened. But first, let's show the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago and her latest commentary that she voiced in response to island opposition of Trinidad and Tobago being used as a military outpost in aggressions against Venezuela.
You worry about radar and you worry about Venezuela. Don't worry. And I'll tell you something, I think it's the height of hypocrisy and unkindness that there are people in our country who want to fight the Americans. Tonight, I say it again, I stand in bilateral relationships with the United States of America. They are amongst our oldest trading partners, one. They are our largest trading partner in terms of millions of dollars trade between us. With Venezuela, we have 0.000 trade. With the United States, Minister of Trade, are you here? Kennedy, you may know. Billions of dollars in trade.
Let's really take a look when she says that the United States are friends. Let's take a look at how the United States has colonized the Caribbean. I said recently that the United States is I said recently that the Caribbean is the Africa of the Western Hemisphere, in that it has been systematically destabilized and its resources stolen. Now, when this woman says, well, we have trade with the United States and we don't have trade with Venezuela, this is not because of some genuine reasoning for why the United States is trading with Trinidad and not Venezuela. It is solely because keeping Trinidad inextricably linked in economy to the United States keeps them in their back pocket. This is an example of soft power. It also allows for them to continue to control it allows them to continue to control Trinidad, and thus they are not operating as a sovereign nation. This is another example of colonialism. We know that the term colonizer went out of fashion after World War II. However, the action did not go out of fashion. So I'm going to take you through a series of ways in which the United States has colonized the Caribbean. Now, someone asked, is she scared of the U.S.? No. And I think that it's very I want you guys to really stop trying to apply your version of humanism to these individuals in power, because it's not practical. They haven't demonstrated anything to give us reason to give them that type of benefit of the doubt. So let's start. And I will come back to this woman. I will come back to her because it all connects. First, in 1930s, Puerto Rico experienced sterilization on such a mass level that 1 in 3 Puerto Rican women were sterilized. This is because the United States decided that Puerto Rico was overpopulated. They literally, unbeknownst to the population of Puerto Rico, prevented women from being able to give birth because they had colonized the country and decided that they wanted there to be less people on the island. This is an example of hard power. And this doesn't get talked about enough, largely in part because it is violence against women. Now, whenever it's violence against men and armies, etc., we hold that at a very different standard. However, violence against women and the usurping of the rights to their bodies is also warfare, and it is also hard power. We are literally seeing it right now in the Sudan and Congo and in the immense amounts of sexual assault cases. This is done to continuously keep the population in a state of fear. We see this in how these men go to different countries under the American flag and they commit assault against members of those countries. We see that in the comfort women. We see that in Japan, in Okinawa. We see this all over. And we know that it is not just a matter of boys will be boys or of literally just men being bad men. It is allowed. It is absolutely supported and it is projected because it is an act of colonialism, and it continues to not only put the women in fear, but their husbands, their fathers, their brothers. It puts them in fear. Next, the 1983 Grenada invasion. In 1981, you had Maurice Bishop, who was a young man in Grenada, and he said, you know, I'm actually going to do a coup and overthrow Gary, and I'm going to bring socialism into Grenada. So he actually leads a revolution in Grenada called the New Jewel Movement, and the goal is to bring socialism and possibly communism to Grenada. In doing so, he becomes really tight with Fidel Castro in Cuba. Now, even though the the Cold War really was at its height in the 60s, we know that it didn't get fully disseminated or fully dissolved until the 80s. And the truth of the matter is that Fidel Castro presented as an example of a winner because he did successfully overthrow the government. And whether or not you feel his rule was authoritarian, etc., it doesn't change the fact that he successfully overthrew the government. And in doing so, he was able to show that there could be another type of government in the region. This other type of government in the region was really important. And it was very necessary that people understood that there could be socialism. And people did not want to believe this. The United States did not want people to believe this. So it was a big deal and it happened. And the United States was very against this. And the United States was also very fearful of Maurice Bishop because Grenada, unlike Cuba, was an English-speaking country. So they were very concerned that Grenada in achieving this alliance with Castro would be strengthened in its socialism and thus would bring socialism to the United States and also, of course, to other parts of the region. We have to acknowledge this because that has always been the effort. Suppress, suppress, suppress. Here's Maurice Bishop talking about why the FBI was so concerned about Grenada. And he's doing this in the United States at a talk.
The reason for all of this hostility is because some perceive that what is happening in Grenada can lead to a new socio-economic and political path of development. They give all kinds of reasons and excuses, some of them credible, some utter rubbish. There's an interesting one that we saw very recently in a secret report of the State Department. I want to tell you about that one, so you can reflect on that one. That secret report made this point, that Grenada is different to Cuba and Nicaragua. And the Grenada Revolution is in one sense even worse, I'm using their language, than the Cuban and Nicaraguan revolutions, because the people of Grenada and the leadership of Grenada speaks English and therefore can communicate directly to the people of the United States. I can see from your applause, sisters and brothers, that you agree with the report. But I want to tell you what that same report also said, and said that also made us very dangerous. And that is that the people of Grenada and the leadership of Grenada are predominantly black. They said that 95% of our population is black, and they had a correct statistic.
So we must also acknowledge, again, that blackness has been at a center position in the colonizing of this region and suppression. When people try and make it like race doesn't matter, it's about economy, you're ignoring the fact that race has been an integral tool to upholding economy and to suppressing. Okay, that's not by accident. That's also because the fact is that when people were stolen and trafficked across these waters and brought to these nations, they didn't do so quietly. There is a DNA within us that still says we need to get ours. And many of the people in the Caribbean and in South America were not about that life. And they actually were Maroons, and they fought and they escaped and they started their own organizations, their own company. They did start their own companies, their own tribes, etc. So we cannot discount that they know that that racial unity is absolutely an aspect that they need to continue to suppress. And so in doing so, they came into Grenada in 1983. They actually got in between Maurice Bishop and his partner, Bernard Cord. Bernard Cord flipped. Next thing you know, Maurice Bishop was killed in front of a firing squad. We don't even know where his body is to this day. They also put his pregnant girlfriend in front of a firing squad. And we also know that in 1983, they invaded using a soft power technique. Grenada does not have a military base. However, in Fidel Castro building our airport, they tried to say that that was a military base being built by Cuba. Grenada does not have a U.S. military base, but it does have a medical school. And the medical school in Grenada is very strongly founded by Americans and attended by Americans. Thus, they used the presence of Americans at the medical school as a manufactured consent to then invade Grenada and decide, well, we have to come in here because we have Americans here and you guys are spreading communism and we can't have that. This is an example of soft power leading to hard power. The 1994 NAFTA deal. So the North American Free Trade Agreement was essentially an agreement made between Mexico, Canada, and the United States that cut off trade with everyone else in the Caribbean and made it so that these countries were just trading between each other, which again made it white on white on white. And if you think Mexico doesn't have white people, you're bugging. Okay? Mexico absolutely has its own elite. And those capitalist elite really are not with it. They do not like any of this nonsense. So those folks all aligned with each other and got together, and it created a huge economic shift in the region. The Caribbean was no longer able to sustain as a part of trade. Grenada had been the number 2 trader for spices after India. That's why we have a literal nutmeg on our flag. And after NAFTA, that was a wrap. So that limited the ability to trade from agriculture. It limited the ability for them to control their prices. And it made it so that they now controlled what the prices were for these items across the world. When we talk about the Banana Republic, that is them deciding that bananas should only cost a certain amount. And if these countries in Central America were going to change the prices, then they were going to change the actual power structure in those countries. You think sometimes that this is only about oil? They want to control everything. And if you look at the colonization of Africa, you understand it's not simply just about controlling oil and uranium. They wanted to control the rubber. They want to control the white beans. They want to control everything. Tobacco, sugarcane, everything is able to be financialized. Everything. When we talk about the Caribbean and the 1994 NAFTA deal, it was a huge blow that has forever shifted the ability of the Caribbean to be sovereign. And thus, it has to be intrinsically attached to the United States. This is also when we see tourism take a huge boom. But tourism is nothing other than just traveling colonization, because the people on the islands can't even afford to go to the other islands like that. Now, yes, there is the CARICOM, which is supposed to be the union of all the islands coming together. However, the CARICOM gets disrupted when you have individuals like Kamala in Trinidad and other nations having to do trade agreements with the U.S. or feeling like they should do trade agreements with the U.S. that end up shutting out other nations in the Caribbean instead of actually working within the Caribbean to strengthen their unity and operate with unity to the U.S. Let's talk about the destabilizing of Haiti. The United States has been committed from even the Lincoln era to keeping the Caribbean, and specifically Haiti, from ever thinking for a second that it can rise back up. Let me just take a moment. When people say statements like this, Caribbean is not going to achieve solidarity, corrupt leadership, and proximity to the U.S. are immutable obstacles, I have a real frustration with people like you, because you haven't lived forever and you're not going to live forever. You're speaking in forevers that you have no real ability to stand on. And you are infusing your own defeatism while heralding the United States as some insurmountable enemy, which is just simply not the case. And anytime you bring that energy into the conversation, I am going to call you out, because that is the same energy of Harriet Tubman's husband, who told her, don't run away. It's better that you stay with your master who knows you than going and getting in trouble. Now you've got someone else here who says, but he ain't wrong. And I have no idea why you all are so committed to thinking you're right. And I consider you to be ops. So Rolando, please remove them. Remove people in here who do not believe that we can make any change, because I don't want that energy in this space. I am not saying the change will happen today. I'm not saying it can happen tomorrow, but I will never for a second give the United States and colonialism the power of believing that it is impervious to harm. Never again. Even having an inkling of that is a cancer that spreads. Get that op mindset out of here. The destabilizing of Haiti is largely put and grounded in the fact that, of course, Haiti was the first to achieve independence from its colonizer. Unfortunately, it has never been able to achieve true independence because they have consistently kept it destabilized. They have consistently invaded its shores, both in physical form and in other deleterious methods. For instance, Israel has provided Haiti with Haitian militias and Haitian gangs with actual weapons to keep them destabilized. We have the CIA, which has consistently gone in and taken out whoever they feel like is trying to bring Haiti to sovereignty. We had former economics advisor Jeffrey Sachs on the show, who said straight up that Moissy, who is pictured here, told him they're coming to get me. And he was like, no, the CIA is not coming to get you. And then he got murked. And now you see Jeffrey all over the world trying to tell people these folks is a problem. Don't trust them. Don't trust them. France has been stealing from Haiti since Haiti got its independence. We also have to acknowledge the ways in which there have been direct infringement upon their food sovereignty. And I want to keep coming back to food sovereignty. A people who cannot feed themselves are slaves. It may not be to the extent to which we were an enslaved people working in the cane fields, but we are still in the same way run by a higher hand that determines whether or not we can care for ourselves and how we can care for ourselves. Bill Clinton, in his imperialist mindset, decided this is what we're going to do with you all, Haiti. The Haitians who were at the top, and again, there are always going to be people at the top who will sell out their people. The people at the top said, all right, we're going to rock with you and we're going to actually become an import business. And so they made deals with the United States and NAFTA to be an import only business, even though Haiti had a large agrarian business of rice. So now you had Haitians who, instead of eating their own rice, were importing rice from Arkansas and from Thailand. You'll see here that these bags say product of Thailand, but you'll notice that the imagery on them and the writing on them makes it seem as though they are actually from Haiti. That is not by accident. Bill Clinton eventually came and actually apologized. Now, I will not front. I have not been able to get deep in the weeds for what the real reason why he apologized is. But here he is saying, my bad, Haiti.
Rich countries that produce a lot of food should sell it to poor countries and relieve them of the burden of producing their own food. So thank goodness they can lead directly into the industrial era. It has not worked. It's maybe been good for some of my farmers in Arkansas, but it has not worked. It was a mistake. It was a mistake that I was a party to. I am not pointing the finger at anybody. I did that. I had to live every day with the consequences of the lost capacity.
The unmitigated caucasity of stating that you completely disrupting and destabilizing an entire country's ability to feed itself is about you having to live with the repercussions of that. They never cease to amaze me.
to produce a rice crop in Haiti to feed those people because of what I did. Nobody else.
Now, shout out to folks like Dr. Bertrude Albert, who was pictured in the video. There is efforts to restore the ability for Haitians to actually grow their own rice. She has been working for years to build a canal that allows for water to be redistributed back out to the fields to restore the Haitian rice fields, which will also give them the opportunity to create their own sovereignty. Now, she was on my podcast, Small Doses, rest in peace, Small Doses podcast. She was on Small Doses podcast 2 years ago. Let's listen.
A big fear of Haiti. Even today, some might say like, well, slavery is abolished. Why would the United States fear Haiti? A lot of people don't know. In 2004, Haitian President Aristide, the first democratically elected president, Aristide, he was overthrown. And the two players that orchestrated this coup d'etat was the United States and France. But why did they do that? It's because Aristide, he stood before the UN, he stood before the world and said, Haiti had to pay an indemnity. We paid the equivalent of $21 billion for our freedom. France forced us to pay this money. And now the calculations are it's between $21 billion to $30 billion. France must pay Haiti back. And so there's this big fear now. If France pays Haiti back, what about the other former colonies? What about Black people in the United States and the reparation that they're owed for slavery? And so if you destabilize Haiti, if you take Aristide out of power, that discussion ends. And essentially it did end.
So that's Dr. Bertrude Albert, and she's brilliant and has been so steadfast at helping to bring Haiti back into the ability to support itself, even in the midst of all the news that we hear about destabilizing of Haiti. We have to understand that there are folks who are on the ground doing the work. And I am a large believer, and I will stand on this, that Haiti is the key to the Western Hemisphere being freed, the same way that Palestine is the key to the East being freed. 1000%. Now, part of the destabilizing of Haiti was also carried out because of the ability for the La República Dominicana, which was next door to it, to keep watch for the United States while continuously repressing Haitians. Rafael Trujillo was put in place in 1930, and he was, wait, I'm messing up. Rafael Trujillo was put in place, and he was actually in power till 1961, I think, when he was assassinated. Now, Trujillo was a very light-skinned man who came up through the ranks of the military when the U.S. was occupying the Dominican Republic. And he came up through the ranks very quickly and was put into power. He led in October 1937, from September through October 1937, he led one of the most heinous genocides ever, with 15,000 Haitian men and children systematically murdered on his own orders. Now, this happened along the borders of the Haiti and the Dominican Republic. Now, this man wanted to be white so bad that he would powder his face, and he was deeply committed to carrying out the suppression and repression of Black folks in Haiti and in the region. Now, the women that you see there are, damn it, their names. Hold on. The women you see there are sisters the Mirabal sisters, who are, their story is put in historical fiction in The Time of the Butterflies, but he basically was, why can't I talk all of a sudden? The Mirabal sisters were three women who were a part of the resistance. Okay. They were a part of the resistance against Trujillo, and they were three of many who were consistently fighting Trujillo. Now, Celine talks about the cult of personality. He was so about himself that, yes, he named the capital Ciudad Trujillo. Like, he changed it from Santo Domingo to Trujillo City. And this was going on for such a long time because the United States knew that as long as he was there and he was capitulating to their wants and needs, and he was being friendly to what they were trying to do. And in World War II, he also, declared war against the ally, with the allies, etc., that they could have him in their back pocket. Because I have to remind you that the Caribbean is in the Western Hemisphere. The Caribbean is in the back pocket of the United States. And so many people do not think about this because they just think of it as a tourist destination. It is filled with resources. Filled. This brings us to Cuba, its sanctions, and Guantanamo. Now, the Cuban sanctions have been going on because, again, like Maurice Bishop mentioned earlier, there has been a fear that socialism would spread in the region and that this would undermine not only capitalist intentions, but the ability for the United States to have power over all of these other countries. It is capitalism that allows them to be able to have that power because they are able to continue to use and wield the interests of the society's most degraded people, which are that's not how I want to put it. They are able to appeal to the interests of society's greedy. And as long as they can psychologically control the greed addicted members of those societies, then they can control the societies at large. Socialism actively undermines the ability to actually gain capitalistically because the system itself does not gain strength from that mindset. The system itself is strengthened by actual cooperative working. So there is no reason for, in a socialist environment that is truly socialist, there's no ability in the same way for someone like the United States to be able to hold power. So there has been sanctions placed on Cuba for decades now that are continuing to diminish the ability for Cubans to live freely, and for actual socialism to exist and thrive. So when people say, well, socialism hasn't really worked, that is not the case. Socialism has been met with sanctions. It has been met with impediments. It has been met with violence. And this is why we have to make sure that we go and read about the things that the U.S. has said was bad. In addition, because I had someone say to me the other day, well, unlike Venezuela, the United States has never encroached upon Caribbean land, which is an absolute nonsense statement. Guantanamo Bay, the prison. Yeah, that's Cuba, y'all. Guantanamo Bay is Cuba. The reason why the United States still owns Guantanamo Bay goes all the way back to the Spanish-American War. U.S. forces joined up and they took Guantanamo from Spain during this war. And then after the war, when they occupied Cuba, they wrote a new constitution and inserted an amendment in that constitution that forced Cuba to sell or lease land to the U.S. in order to maintain their independence. Now, I want to remind you that folks always talk about how we can't change our constitution, etc. The United States rewrites constitutions like folks is rewriting their relationships with Puff Daddy. I don't want to watch the Puff Daddy documentary because I know it's going to be a bunch of liars, by the way. It's just going to literally be a bunch of people sitting in there pretending like they weren't there the entire time that all this was going on and turning the other cheek. I don't got time for that. The United States has rewritten Japan's constitution. They've rewritten Cuba's constitution. They be rewriting constitutions like the Bible has been rewritten in whatever way it serves them. The Platt Amendment then got re-upped in 1934, when there was a 1934 treaty that again said that the U.S. has to be able to lease this land from Cuba, or else they will not be able to exist sovereign. So basically, like, if you don't give us this land, we're going to invade you. This brings us to our beginning. Now, this is the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago. Her name is Kamala Prasad Bissessar. And she is a member of the United National Congress. Now, there are two main parties in Trinidad: the United National Congress, which is mostly Indian, and the People's National Movement, which is mostly Afro-Caribbean, aka Black. I just want to replay what she said in the beginning to refresh your memory about where I'm about to go with this.
You worry about radon, you worry about Venezuela. Don't worry. And I'll tell you something, I think it's the height of hypocrisy and unkindness that there are people in our country who want to fight the Americans. Tonight, I say it again, I stand in bilateral relationships with the United States of America. They are amongst our oldest trading partners, one.
Kamala Prasad Bissessar became the first woman prime minister of Trinidad in 2010. She got to this position with the help of Cambridge Analytica. Cambridge Analytica is a now, quote unquote, defunct firm that uses user data that it got from social media sites to help advance the interests of various companies and individuals. Among its founders and board members was Steve Bannon. As you know, Steve Bannon is a longtime confidant and member of Donald Trump's inner circle. He was not the sole owner, but it was also largely owned by Republican megadonor Robert Mercer and family. Cambridge Analytica went in to Trinidad and put forth a campaign that would encourage apathy amongst the young voters. That apathy would be carried out culturally, because ultimately the Afro-Trinidadians and the Indian Trinidadians were living differently in terms of their cultural makeup. I go about this in extensiveness in my Smarty Rants on Patreon that I did about Nicki Minaj and how she is connected to Republicans. However, the bite-size, travel-size version I'll give you right here is that this woman used duplicitous means via Cambridge Analytica to target the voting bloc of Trinidad and sway folks into apathy. Thus, her voting bloc, the Indian folks, would show up in greater numbers and get her the position. It is no coincidence that Steve Bannon and Robert Mercer are a part of the company that was employed to do this. She is now the Prime Minister of Trinidad. She is in support of the invasion of Venezuela. She has said to you right there that she is friends with the United States. Which brings me back to my original thesis, which is that the United States colonized the Caribbean. They are not the friends of the Caribbean. And any members of Caribbean governments who are capitulating, who are supporting, and who are allied with the United States are not in allyship with the people of the Caribbean. And so when we see people like this prime minister, when we see folks like there was with Trujillo, we know that that is a member of a ruling class who is being fed by the capitalist dollars dripped in blood. And the only thing that will change that is political education around the Caribbean and the surrounding nations that reminds folks who they were before these people came and colonized them.
A man